This is at AC15C1 after my mods are done. And notice it doesn't look like a modded amp, and the common sense, there's not a lot of big parts sticking out and new wires running everywhere and things going crazy, and there's no hot glue holding it all together. I made some very substantive changes to the circuit that are not visibly obvious, so you can see where there's a whole bunch of half-watt carbon films that did not used to be there. One of the most important things I did was I changed the op-amp path, the solid-state path which mixes the channels, buffers, and amplifies the reverb, and on the AC30 provides an effects loop. In stock form, it's not unity gain. It's got a gain factor of about 4, and that does not clip within that solid-state path. You're not getting op-amp clipping, but it can push the phase inverter a little bit too hard. So I did a whole bunch of math, I guess about a year or so ago, and figured out where they went wrong, and I've corrected this to be unity gain. And when I did it on that first amp, I had a whole bunch of switches hooked up in the air, and I could bypass all that entirely and go between a pure analog mixer like they had on the JMI amps versus this, and there was no difference. It was an inaudible change. So these are very high quality, good op amps like you'd find in a mixing console. It's a very high rail-to-rail supply. You're not going to run into headroom issues or noise issues. It's just a good way to do it at this price point, and price point's quite a bit higher than this amp. So they're selling you an awful lot of good technology, and this is very reliable analog stuff. The other important thing I did was I changed the filtering for the preamp stages from the ladder node, like you might find in a Marshall or a Fender, to what I call a tree branch node, which is what the old JMIs had. In stock form, this was a partial tree branch, partial ladder. It's now the full tree branch. So every preamp node is derived from the screen supply. So each preamp node has substantively less filtering than it did. And that adds up to a very responsive sound for playing dynamics. And some other stuff I did that, I just don't want to get too far in the weeds. And I'm going to let you hear it, but first we're going to hear it again through the greenback that's in there. And then I'm going to put in the Alnico Blue that the client provided and let you hear that. So you'll know roughly what's the difference from yesterday's video based on the changes I made to the circuit versus the change from this speaker to the Blue. One other thing I did, the stock bias in this amp was just a little on the hot side. It was 14.11 watts with the wall voltage at 124, which is what it was here on this Thursday morning in May in Memphis. And so that's just barely above the 14 watts maximum that I like for these. I aim for 12 to 14 watts on an AC30 or AC15 per tube. That's the idle dissipation, not the output of the amp. And resistors come in various stepped values. So it's not like you can say, well, 120 is a little too hot, 150 is a little too cool, let me find 137. That does not exist. You can make it with parallel resistors, but even if you chase some ideal perfect thing, that's going to vary as you change tubes. It's going to vary with the wall voltage. So you're chasing a perfection that does not really exist. If the wall voltage never exceeded 120, the stock 120 ohm resistor, which actually measured 117 point something ohms, would have been fine. But it was just on the hot side, so I replaced it with a Vishay 5 watt 150 ohm resistor, which actually measures 148.6, and that put the idle dissipation at 12.37 watts per tube. And the B plus went from 331 to 341. That's not the B plus totally, that's the plate to cathode voltage. So it increased the plate to cathode voltage by about 10 volts. We're right on the edge of what an EL84 wants. You don't want to exceed 350. And this is at 341.6. So we're under 350. The vintage ones ran about 20 volts cooler on the AC30 and about 30 volts cooler on the AC15s, but this will be fine. So we have cooled off the bias slightly. We have not raised the plate to cathode voltage enough that there's going to be any added or introduced concerns from that. The original resistor was mounted on the other side of the board, which is good because it got it physically away from these capacitors. Again, that was that style, a cement block style. I use this fichet and I have it moved away from these capacitors. So I'm achieving the same thing, but this way, if someone needs to change the bias, it's easy to do. I also have new 2-watt screen grid resistors of larger values mounted off the board for airflow and heat dissipation. Though these 2 watts are less likely to get hot to begin with, should an EL84 decide to just shit the bed, it can take one of these out with it. So having it up off the board will prevent the board from getting burned if that happens, at which point it's a fairly easy, inexpensive repair. I had planned to show you the modded amp through the greenback and then change to the Celestian blue, let you hear both. But a tube went south on us in the middle of that process, and I'm not gonna put the greenback back and then put the blue back just for the purpose of this video. I'm sorry, I just have too many things to do. General overview of the mods. A little bit for reliability in the screen grids like you saw. Other than that, just making it closer to the actual JMI circuit. That's a change to the way the tone stack's wired. Some values of plate resistors. Some better sounding components here and there. Not a ton of work. A little bit more reliable, up the wattage of some of the resistors. You know, just made it generally sweeter, and I deneutered the normal channel. And I'll let you hear little excerpts of each channel with different guitars and different styles. I'm not trying to sell the amp. I'm not really trying to sell my mods. I am so slammed right now, I'm not going to be able to take a lot of new work in for at least another month or two. It's just between supply chain distribution issues this past 2 years, things have gotten behind, and I need to get some of this stuff out before I let too much new stuff in, unless it's just really particularly fantastic stuff that I cannot bear not to be with. So, you know, that's just the reality of trying to do this as a business during the pandemic and all the associated distribution fun. If that had a whole bunch of delay, you'd be loving it.